The city skyline shimmered through the towering glass windows of Zenith Tech's headquarters, a beacon of ambition piercing the San Francisco night. Rain streaked down the panes, blurring the city's lights into a kaleidoscope of gold and red, as if the world outside mourned the chaos within. Inside the 47th floor boardroom, the air was thick with tension, heavy with the weight of a crisis that threatened to topple an empire. Keyboards clacked in a frantic rhythm. Phones vibrated silently on the polished mahogany table. And the CEO, Richard Caldwell, stood like a general facing a losing battle. His tailored navy suit was impeccable, but his face was a storm of fury, his sharp blue eyes darting to the massive screen dominating the room. A single word pulsed in blood-red letters. Error. It was a silent scream, a warning that Zenith Tech's flagship AI platform, the one that powered half the world's financial transactions, was dead in the water. "It's been 3 hours," Caldwell roared, his fist slamming the table so hard that coffee cups trembled. 3 hours, and our entire system is down. Clients are losing millions, billions, and you're telling me nobody knows what's wrong. His voice reverberated, silencing the room. Senior engineers, their faces pale and drawn, avoided his gaze. Sarah Lynn, head of engineering, clutched her pen like a lifeline, her knuckles white. Mark Reynolds, the CTO, leaned back in his chair, his usual swagger replaced by a nervous tick in his jaw. The platform, a marvel of machine learning that processed trillions in transactions daily, was frozen, and the clock was ticking. Every minute of downtime was a hemorrhage of trust, money, and reputation. The boardroom felt like a sinking ship, and Caldwell was determined to find someone to blame. In the corner, nearly invisible against the sleek, modern decor, stood Maria Delgado, a janitor in her late 50s. Her gray-streaked hair was tucked under a faded navy cap, her hands calloused from years of scrubbing floors and emptying bins. She pushed her cleaning cart with quiet precision, her eyes fixed on the floor, as if she could will herself out of existence. Maria had worked at Zenith for a decade, her presence as unremarkable to the executives as the hum of the air conditioning. But behind her, lingering near the glass door, was her daughter, Elena, a 22-year-old in a worn hoodie and faded jeans, her sharp brown eyes scanning the room with intensity that belied her casual appearance. She clutched a battered laptop bag, its frayed strap a stark contrast to the polished luxury around her. Elena's presence was an anomaly, a ripple in the room's frenetic energy, but no one noticed her. Not yet. Caldwell's gaze flicked toward Maria, his irritation flaring like a spark in dry grass. "You!" he snapped, pointing a manicured finger. "This isn't the time for cleaning. Get out." Maria froze, her hands tightening on the cart's handle, her cheeks flushing with a mix of embarrassment and resignation. She opened her mouth to apologize, but before she could speak, Elena stepped forward, her sneakers silent on the polished floor. "She's just doing her job, sir," Elena said, her voice quiet but steady, cutting through the room like a blade through silk. Every head turned. Caldwell's eyes narrowed, his lip curling into a sneer. "And who the hell are you?" he demanded, his tone dripping with disdain. "Some intern who thinks she can speak to me?" The executives snickered, their laughter a cruel echo. Sarah's pen tapped faster. Mark leaned to a colleague, muttering, "What's this kid doing here?" But Elena didn't flinch. Her calm was unnerving, like a still lake hiding a current strong enough to drown. The tension in the room coiled tighter, a spring ready to snap. Who was this girl, and why wasn't she intimidated? Elena Delgado was no stranger to being underestimated. Born and raised in a cramped apartment in the Mission District, she'd grown up in the shadow of San Francisco's tech giants, her world a far cry from the glass towers that defined the city's elite. Her mother, Maria, had worked tirelessly to provide for them, taking double shifts at Zenith while Elena taught herself to code on a second-hand PC that hummed like an old refrigerator. By 12, she was writing script to automate her homework. By 16, she was hacking into abandoned forums for practice, always careful to leave no trace. Now, at 22, she was a senior at City College, majoring in computer science on a partial scholarship, her brilliance hidden behind her quiet demeanor and thrift store clothes. She'd come to Zenith that evening for a simple reason. Maria had forgotten her lunch, and Elena, ever dutiful, had brought it to her. But now, standing in the boardroom, She felt the weight of every eye on her. She stood tall, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, her expression calm but resolute, like a soldier facing a firing squad with nothing to lose. Richard Caldwell, by contrast, was the embodiment of corporate arrogance. At 45, he clawed his way to the top of Zenith Tech, transforming it from a startup into a global powerhouse. His name was synonymous with innovation, his face plastered on Forbes covers and TED Talk stages. But behind his sharp blue eyes and perfectly styled hair was a man who thrived on control, quick to dismiss anyone he deemed beneath him. To him, Elena was less than nothing, a janitor's daughter, an intruder in his world of glass towers and billion-dollar deals. The executives mirrored his disdain. Sarah Lynn, 38, was a brilliant engineer but jaded by years of navigating Caldwell's ego, her impatience showing in the sharp tap of her pen. Mark Reynolds, 42, was the CTO who coasted on charm and connections, his smirk a permanent fixture as he whispered to a colleague, "What's she going to do, mop the servers?" The power imbalance was palpable, a chasm between the suited elite and the young woman in a hoodie who dared to stand her ground. Caldwell's voice cut to the laughter, laced with condescension. "This is a crisis, kid. Take your mom and go home. We don't need distractions." Maria's face flushed deeper, her hands trembling on the cart. She tugged at Elena's sleeve, whispering, "Meja, let's go." But Elena's eyes didn't waver. She adjusted her laptop bag, her fingers brushing the worn strap, as if drawing strength from it. "I might be able to help," she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet authority that made the laughter falter. The room erupted again, louder this time, the executive's amusement tinged with mockery. Caldwell's smirk widened, his arms crossing. "Help? Sweetheart, this isn't a high school coding club. Get out before I call security." His words were a dismissal, a command, but Elena didn't move. She stepped closer to the conference table, her sneakers silent against the polished floor, her presence a challenge to the room's hierarchy. The laughter lingered, a cruel undercurrent, but Elena's resolve was unshaken. She met Caldwell's gaze, her brown eyes steady. "Your AI platform's core algorithm is stuck in a recursive loop," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "It's trying to process a corrupted data packet from a third-party API. That's why your system's down." The room fell silent, the air heavy with shock. Sarah's tapping stopped. Her pen hovered midair. Mark's smirk vanished, his brow furrowing. Caldwell blinked, caught off guard, his confidence cracking like thin ice. "What did you just say?" he demanded, his voice low but sharp. Elena didn't hesitate. "Your platform's error logs are public-facing on your internal network. I checked them while you were yelling. The issue's in the transaction validation module, line 472, to be exact." She pulled her laptop from her bag, opened it with a practiced motion, and turned the screen toward the executives. A dense wall of code glowed in the dim light, highlighted lines pinpointing the error with surgical precision. The engineers leaned forward, their eyes narrowing as they scanned the code. Sarah's brow furrowed, her skepticism warring with curiosity. How did you access our logs?" she asked, her voice tight with suspicion. Elena's response was matter-of-fact. "I use a guest Wi-Fi. Your security's outdated. Took me 2 minutes." The room froze, the executives exchanging uneasy glances. Caldwell's face reddened, his jaw clenching. "You're telling me you hacked our system?" he spat, his voice rising. "Security." Elena raised a hand, unfazed, her calm a stark contrast to his fury. "I didn't hack anything. Your logs are open to anyone on the network. You should fix that." Mark leaned over to Sarah, his whisper audible in the silence. "She's bluffing. No way she knows this stuff." But the doubt in his voice betrayed him. Elena wasn't bluffing. She pointed to the screen, her finger steady. "The corrupted packet is coming from a vendor in Singapore. Their API updated last night at 1:03 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and your system didn't adapt. It's overloading your servers with invalid requests." She tapped a key, pulling up a graph of server traffic spiking at 2:17 a.m., the data points forming a jagged mountain of chaos. The engineers stared dumbfounded, their skepticism giving way to awe. Sarah stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "That's accurate," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Caldwell's eyes darted between Elena and the screen, his confidence fracturing further. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're a kid. What do you know about our system?" Elena didn't answer immediately. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, the screen shifting to a diagnostic tool she coded herself, a sleek, intuitive interface that mapped Zenith server activity in real time, color-coded streams of data flowing like rivers. "Your platform's built on a modified TensorFlow framework," she said, her voice calm but firm, like a teacher addressing a slow student. "But you've got a custom patch in the neural net that's incompatible with the vendor's new API. It's creating a feedback loop." She zoomed in on a line of code, highlighting a syntax error buried deep in the system's architecture. The engineers gasped, their eyes wide. Mark's face paled, his earlier bravado gone. "How did you find that?" he stammered, his voice barely audible. "I've been studying your open-source repositories for my thesis," Elena said, her tone matter-of-fact. "Your code's impressive, but sloppy in places. You left vulnerabilities a first year could exploit." The room was silent now, the only sound the hum of the air conditioning and the relentless patter of rain against the windows. Caldwell's hands balled into fists, his knuckles white. "You expect me to believe a college kid figured this out in 10 minutes? He snapped, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Who are you really?" "Some competitor's spy." His accusation hung in the air, desperate and grasping. Maria, still standing by her cart, spoke for the first time, her voice trembling but laced with pride. "She's my daughter, Mr. Caldwell, and she's smarter than anyone in this room." Her words were soft but piercing, a mother's defense of her child cutting to the corporate bravado. The executives shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting to the floor. Elena didn't react. Her focus locked on the laptop. She typed another command, and the screen flickered, a progress bar appearing. "System reboot initiated." "Give it 60 seconds, she said, her voice steady. "Your servers will stabilize." The boardroom was a pressure cooker, every eye glued to the massive screen on the wall. The red error message blinked once, twice, then vanished. Green text scrolled across the display. "System online." Transaction processing resumed. A collective gasp filled the room, the tension breaking like a dam. Sarah's jaw dropped, her pen clattering to the table. Mark slumped his chair, muttering, "Impossible." Caldwell stared at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and rage, his carefully constructed world crumbling. "How? How did you do that?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. Elena closed her laptop with a soft click, her expression still calm, almost serene. "I didn't just fix it," she said, her voice carrying a quiet power. "I patched your system to prevent this from happening again. You're welcome." She slid a USB drive across the table, its scratched surface a stark contrast to the polished mahogany. "The code's on there. You can have your team verify it." Sarah snatched the drive, her hands trembling as she plugged it into her laptop. Lines of clean, efficient code filled her screen, a solution so elegant it made her own team's work look like a rough draft. "This is brilliant," she whispered, her voice thick with awe. Caldwell's voice was low, almost a growl. "Who are you?" Elena met his gaze, her brown eyes burning with a quiet intensity that made him flinch. "I'm Elena Delgado, a senior at City College. I've been coding since I was 12, reverse engineering systems like yours for fun. And I'm the person who just saved your company from a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit." The room went silent, the weight of her words settling like dust after an explosion. Caldwell's mouth opened, then closed, his arrogance crumbling like a sandcastle against the tide. Maria's eyes glistened with pride, her hands trembling on the cart as she watched her daughter command the room. Elena stepped forward, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You know what's worse than your system crashing?" she said, her tone steady but laced with fire. "It's that you ignored the people who could have prevented it. Your engineers flagged this vulnerability 6 months ago. I saw their reports in your logs, detailed, urgent reports. But you dismissed them because they weren't senior enough." She pointed at Sarah and Mark, who flinched, their faces flushed with guilt. "You build a culture where people like me, people like my mom, are invisible. And that's why you were one error code away from losing everything. Caldwell's face was ashen, his hands trembling. He tried to speak, but no words came, his authority unraveling like a frayed rope. The executives shifted, their eyes darting to floor, unable to meet Elena's gaze. She continued, her voice unwavering. You mocked my mom for doing her job. You mocked me for trying to help. But I just fixed your mess in under an hour, something your entire team couldn't do in 3. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle, her presence filling the room. Maybe next time, you'll listen to the people you think are beneath you. Sarah stood, her voice shaky but resolute. She's right, Richard. We ignored the warnings. I ignored them. And her patch, it's better than anything we've written. Mark nodded slowly, his earlier smirk replaced by a look of quiet shame. Caldwell's hands trembled, his voice barely a whisper. This doesn't change anything, he stammered. But the words were hollow, a desperate attempt to cling to control. You're still just what? Elena cut in, her voice sharp, her eyes blazing. Just a janitor's daughter? Just a kid? Or just the person who saved your company? The room was silent, the executives frozen, their world turned upside down. Maria stepped forward, placing a hand on Elena's shoulder, her touch grounding and proud. My daughter, she said softly, her voice steady now, is more than you'll ever understand. The next morning, Zenith Tech stock price stabilized, the news of the system recovery spreading like wildfire across financial news outlets. Clients received carefully worded apologies, and the company narrowly avoided catastrophic lawsuits that could have bankrupted it. But in the boardroom, the mood was somber, the air heavy with the aftermath of the crisis. Caldwell sat alone at the head of the table, staring at Elena's USB drive as if it were a grenade. Sarah and Mark had spent the night analyzing her code, poring over every line, confirming its brilliance. They'd also found to ignore reports Elena had mentioned. 6 months of warnings from junior engineers, buried in the system's archives, dismissed by Caldwell's insistence on streamlining feedback. In the lobby, Sarah approached Elena, who stood with Maria near the glass doors, the morning light casting long shadows across the marble floor. We'd like to offer you a job, Sarah said, her voice earnest. Lead developer. Name your salary. Elena smiled faintly, her eyes flicking to her mother. I'm finishing my degree first, she said, and I'm not here to work for people who only value me when it suits them. Sarah nodded, her respect evident. At least let us fund your education, she said. It's the least we can do. Elena glanced at Maria, who gave a small nod, her eyes shining with pride. Okay, Elena said, but only if you give my mom a raise, too. She's been keeping this place running for years. Maria's face lit up, a rare smile breaking through her usual stoicism. Sarah agreed without hesitation, promising to review Maria's compensation and benefits. Meanwhile, Caldwell faced a board inquiry. The ignored reports leaked to the press by an anonymous source, likely a disgruntled engineer emboldened by Elena's stand. The headlines were brutal. Zenith Tech CEO ignores warnings, saved by janitor's daughter. Caldwell issued a public apology, his voice strained as he stood before a sea of cameras, praising an extraordinary young woman for saving the company. But the words fell hollow, his carefully curated image shattered. The board was already discussing his future, whispers of resignation swirling in the halls. As Elena and Maria walked out of Zenith Tech, the rain had stopped, and the city sparkled under a clear, brilliant sky. Elena's laptop bag swung lightly at her side, a symbol of her quiet power, her ability to rewrite the rules of a world that had tried to dismiss her. Maria walked beside her, her steps lighter than they'd been in years, her hand resting proudly on her daughter's arm. The narrator's voice, deep and resonant, filled the scene, carrying the weight of the story's truth. This wasn't just about a system crashing or a company saved. It was about the people we overlook, the voices we silence, and the brilliance we dismiss because it doesn't wear a suit or sit in a corner office. Elena Delgado didn't just fix a machine. She exposed a truth. That talent and heart can come from anywhere, and ignoring it comes at a cost. The camera lingered on Elena and Maria, their silhouettes strong against the city's glow, a mother and daughter who had faced a giant and walked away unbroken. The narrator's voice softened, but its power lingered. In a world that judges too quickly, Elena's story reminds us, the person you underestimate today might be the one who changes everything tomorrow. It's not just about one crisis, one company, or one code. It's about every moment we choose to see or refuse to see, the potential in those around us. The screen faded to black, the narrator's voice a gentle echo. If Elena's story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us what justice really means.